Hello everyone and welcome to Reentry. In this video I'll be going through some of the new things that you will find in update 0.92 of Reentry. Um, the main things that I've been focusing on here is some of the Apollo mechanics. So I'll be going through quite a lot of the procedures and logic when it comes to program 30 and how to execute burns. I've been going through some of the pads. I'll go into details on these things pretty soon. And I've also been refining the entire entry procedures for the command module as it goes through the Earth atmosphere and down to a splashdown. In addition, I've been going through quite a lot of the bugs that you have been reporting on the Trello board. So you will find probably around 100 bug fixes on Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo in this update. But anyways, I've prepared a couple of demos here to just showcase the 0.92 update. So the first thing that I've added is some updates to program 30. So what I'm going to do is to just quickly load into Earth orbit. As you might be familiar with if you've been using the maneuver planner in Apollo, is that the data that you will see gets inserted into the AGC is a little bit different from what the burn tool is saying. So the maneuver planner is saying one thing, and then once you're done with the maneuver planner and you hit execute, these numbers should have been uplinked to the AGC. However, you might have experienced that these numbers are very different. So you've seen some delta V's that's not really a local body. It's just a lot of random numbers. And then the orbit predictions have been kind of very different from the maneuver planner. But once you've executed the burn, you have actually reached a pretty decent orbit to what the maneuver planner did say. The reason was behind this was that some of the numbers has been in various formats, and some of the logics had some issues in the AGC, which I've been going through. So just to showcase this, what I'm going to do now is to just go on to the AGC. I'm just going to separate from the launch vehicle here and make sure that I'm all set. Alright. I've got attitude control. Yes. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to just open the maneuver planner, and that's done with the burn planner button here, and you can see that this is just the same tool that you've seen before. So I'm just going to hit 0, 0 in this one. And you can see that I'm currently in an orbit of 113.9 nautical mile and 106.2 nautical miles of altitude. So it's an elliptical orbit. And what I want to do now is to try and circularize this. But before I go into all of these details, you can see that if I now, for example, set the delta V of, let's say, 25 here, for example, on apogee, you can see that the orbit that it now predicts that I will enter is 120.2 and 113.9. So if I now go into warp 37 and 30, and I'm now manually typing some of this data without requesting this burn. Warp 25. Right, so ignition is right, that we're at 0 hours 42 minutes into the mission, and the burn is scheduled for 1 hour and 19 minutes into the mission. So then I'll start with a 1 and 19 and 25.00 seconds, 2500, and I'm gonna hit proceed. The other thing that I said is that my delta V should be 25 feet per second in the prograde direction. So then I can use verb tone 1 here to change register 1. Notice that I've now fixed where the local body velocity should be placed for prograde and retrograde, or forward or backwards. And that's in R1 now. That's the x-axis of the CSM. It used to be in the z-axis, the R3, and that was just a mistake I've been having for many years. Right, so verb 21, and we said plus. Oops, I'll just do that again. Plus 25.0. Okay, and then I'm going to hit Pro. And now you can see that the numbers that you see in the AGC and the maneuver planner is very similar. There's some differences. That's mostly because of rounding or some other minor things, because the logic between the maneuver planner and the AGC is very different. So you might see some differences here, but at least it's now very, very close to what you would expect. So after this update, once you're running through the program 30, a lot of these numbers will start to make sense because they kind of reflect the burn that you want to have. So the other thing that I've been doing then, related to SPS burns, is if I go into crew members and I can go into ground, and you can see that I have a new section here called request pads. So what I'm going to do now is to open this, and you will see that there's quite a lot of different buttons here. So this top section here contains different forms that you can open up. All of the astronauts on board the Apollo spacecraft, the command module and the lunar module, had different forms with them. And with a pen, they would type down numbers that they would receive from mission control to execute maneuvers. They had pads for quite a lot of different things, and in 0.92 you will see the first version of pads in Reentry. So the first pad you can see here is P30, that's the maneuver pad. We have one for TLI and one for entry. Those are the pads that I've shipped with 0.92. I also have a form for performing a program 52 IMU realign. It's not directly a pad, but it's very similar in its behavior. And then you have different functions here. So this is just the data sheet. But below here you can see that you can request a program 52 IMU realign. You can request different burns. For example, P30 maneuver circulate at PE or AP. And then you have a request entry pad. And you can do this with the maneuver planner, but this one will give you the exact values and the exact time, so you don't need to play around with phase or with the delta V's to kind of brute force your way to find a circulation burn. Now you can just request a pad that will tell you what burn you will need to make, and then you can just program the computer directly from this data. So let's take a look at this, and it's going to look a little bit complicated, but all in all, pads are quite easy because they're quite logically structured. So the first thing that I'm going to do now is just hit circulate at apogee. So I'm pressing this one, and ground will now provide me with a lot of data. So you can see that this is circulation burn using the SPS and the primary GNC system, and then you got a lot of numbers. And on the first sight, this doesn't really make sense, and you actually don't need all of this to perform the burn in Reentry. Some of them are used as backup things, some of them are used to align things, so you can actually skip some of these things. So let's take a look at what these numbers actually mean. So I'm going to open the 30 maneuver pad because this is an SPS burn, and this is the only pad that you will be using for most of the kind of normal SPS burns in Reentry. So I've added this tool that allows you to get kind of a very similar form to what the astronaut would use on board, and it comes with this pen tool here. So you can notice that you can drag it around and you can resize it by just dragging the corners. But if you start drawing, the resizing feature will be disabled, so you can no longer resize it, but you are able to start drawing. So I can, you know, select the pen tool and I can start typing in this data. So this is a circ burn, so I'm just going to use my mouse here to just circ, and this will set AP, so I'll just, you know, type something like this, AP, and this is the SPSGNC. And as you can see, writing with a mouse isn't that easy, but it's doable, and you can do it if you want. And if you need to write something, then this is the way to do it. But if you now kind of scroll with the mouse wheel, you will be able to select all the different tools. So this is the pen tool, like that. Then you have an eraser, which allows you to just remove what you did. You also have undo and redo up here. Clear will remove the entire, clear the entire sheet, and you can start over or start a new burn if it's already filled out. And then you have minus, plus, minus, and all the numbers up to 9. And this is what we're going to be using now. So the first thing that we can see here is that we have circ burn, that's the purpose. And then we have SPS GNC, which is the prop slash guide. So this is the propulsion. This could be, for example, RCS. And then what guidance are we using? For example, SPS or SCS or GNC. And I'm going to use the computer for this burn. So the next thing that it provides us is 60215. That's the weight of the command module. So then I can start to fill this out. 601, oh, 60, and then you have the undo here, 60215. And the next two numbers is plus 079, so that's a plus, and 0, and then the next one is plus 019. That's the pitch and yaw trim of the SPS gimbal that it's expected for the burn. You can just kind of bypass this for now. You can use this one to actually set the trim if you want, but you don't have to. But if you want to follow the real procedures, then you can do it. It is automatically trimmed in Reentry for now, but I'm working on the system, so eventually we'll need to do this. Alright, and the next one is when we plan to perform the burn, and that's at 001. So 1 and 19. And then we had 26. 26. 0. And then the next value is plus 13.8 plus, and what I'm going to do here is to actually include all of the zeros as well. 0, 0, 1, 3.8, and the rest one are at 0, so I'll just do something like that. And then we have the attitude of the burn with the current IMU alignment. What I'm going to do is to realign this, so it will in the end be all zeros. But if there's something wrong with the IMU realignment, or if I'm unable to do it because of time, then I would like to know what attitude I will need to be in with the current alignment. 3, 0, 3. And you can see that all of these data, they follow this sequence. So the first column here is this first row, second one is this one, and so on. So I'm just following it one by one. And then the predicted orbit is 139. And just for simplicity, I'll just do something like this. Oops. 1139. And it's a circular orbit. And the next values are what we will need to insert into the EMS, and that's this system here. And as I mentioned, this update has received quite a lot of updates on how the EMS works, so it's now much more usable for anything that it's designed to do. So let's fill out this data as well. And that's 138. And the burn length is 3.4 seconds. I actually don't need that for now. I'm not going to do any of these manuals, but I can type it down. So I'll just do like, since this format is a little bit different, this is something that I'm working on. So 3.9. And then VC is the delta V as well. So 3.9. Okay. It also tells me some other details. For example, 4 here is the star ID that it wants me to align with if I'm going to perform a P52 and or verify that my attitude is correct. And it tells me that currently that star should be at 23 and 288. That's also something that I will need to shift. So this is the angles. I'm not going to do that now. So this is the angles that this optics will need to be at. And if I would then kind of enter this one, let me just quickly set this up. So I'm just going to go all on high. There we go. Then star 4 would be visible. I think it's here. Yeah, that's 4. So this is to verify that my alignment is correct. So if this would be correct, then it would be safe to say that the computer and the spacecraft kind of align with where they are. The next ones we can all just skip. The other one is that we have no roulage, so then I'll say no here. We also have set star 4 and 45. And then we have the thumb wheel setup for the let's see here, sorry, for the setting the GDC in the platform. But I will skip that for now, and I'm going to just leave this one open for now, so you can still see the pad, and then I'm going to start executing this burn. So first of all, we are going to run this one again, and I'm going to use 25 to say that this burn is at 1, and it's kind of the same, since this is an apogee, and then 26. There we go. And then the delta V was up plus 13.8 plus 138. Then you can see that it will eventually end up in a quite circular orbit by performing this burn. So what I'm going to do now is just hit Pro, and it will show the countdown. So I'm going to just quickly perform these procedures here, and I'll timescale until about 10 minutes before, and I'll align the IMU, just verify that we're in orbit, no, in inertial, and then I'm going to run program 52 and align the IMU. Okay, then I'm going to run rep 49 to kind of set up my preferred burn direction. That's all 0, 0, 0, since I ran program 52 option 1. So now I would like the autopilot to maneuver towards this attitude. And then I'm going to run program 40 to actually execute the burn itself. So Pro, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to help this one a little bit with some time scaling. Okay. And now I'm aligning with the burn vector that I entered into program 30, which is the low to cool vertical of 13.8 in the prograde direction at this ignition time here, with some additional calculations. Okay, then I'm going to count down. The other thing that I can do is to set the delta V here. Delta V and normal. Just to follow these values here as well. Pro, and right, and we have a very short burn, and let's take a look. We entered the predicted orbit quite close. We have some residuals, and I can basically just burn these off myself manually, something like this, and hit Pro. and turn off the EMS. And that's it for the P30 maneuver. And as you noticed, I didn't use the burn planner at all during this. I'm now in a circle orbit. I used the pad, but all in all it took was to know how to use program 30. And program 30 is basically just give me an ignition time when the engines should fire, and then what direction should I burn at that time in local coordinates. So that's quite an easy vector to understand, which means that if it's a prograde or retrograde, then only modify R1 as I did. Okay, so we've seen that the EMS could be used to set the delta V and then measure how well you're performing the burn. But it can do quite a lot of other things too. So what I'm going to do now is to load into a different scenario. And this is a new scenario, and it's called Entry. And the entry scenario is basically the command service module coming in towards Earth on an entry trajectory of about 6.5 degrees and a velocity of 36,000 to 300 feet per second at the entry interface if you don't do anything with the trajectory. So the scenario is kind of designed for you to just quickly load into an entry trajectory where you don't need to do any deorbit burns or any mid-course corrections to get it into a proper entry angle. All you need to care about is the entry procedures. But I'm still going to run through this in detail in this video here, and so that you can see kind of how it all fits together, because the entire entry procedure has been changed and refined. This applies for the physics and drag and lift as you go through the atmosphere. The command module has been designed to have a lift direction as well as drag, which basically allows it to maneuver around in the atmosphere. Not a lot, but enough to kind of stay in control if the limitations of your entry trajectory is set correctly, and that's about 6.5 degrees from a lunar trajectory because of the velocity, or from Earth orbit about 2 degrees. So what I'm going to do now is to go into crew members, request pads, and this is going to look even more scary. So I'm going to request an entry pad, and I'm just going to quickly verify the state here. Okay, so we're on our way towards Earth, and you can see that the trajectory will bring us into the atmosphere at perigee here. As you can see by this kind of greenish bluish dot. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to just use the burn planner to verify my entry angle. I'm not going to hit request, I'm just gonna look at the data. So there we go, 6.49 degrees, and the time to EI is about 1.5 hours, and the velocity at EI is about 36,200 feet per second. So with that, that's a perigee of about 20 nautical miles of altitude. So what I'm going to do now is to request that entry pad, and I'm also going to open the entry pad form. So there's quite a lot of data here, and I kind of showed you how this tool works earlier. So I'm not going to fill out absolutely everything because it will, take some time off from this video. So in order to keep this short, I will not do it. I will have all of this data here, but I'll type in some of the important things that you should notice. So the first one is my entry attitude. That's basically my trim atmospheric trim attitude at 0.05 G. So this is the attitude I want to have my spacecraft in when I'm performing the entry, and that's at 0 roll and let's see here, and 151 in pitch and 0 yaw. The next piece of data is when it wants me to do a horizon check. That's basically entry interface minus 17 minutes. So that's 142 hours 47:07. I'm not going to do that one now. I'll just skip some of those details. So in Noun 61, it will tell me that it predicts a splashdown at 2889 of latitude, and then plus 9.93. The expected maximum G's is set to 6.1. It doesn't really matter much because I don't have automatically entry guidance, but this is the guideline that I want to stick with as I fly through the atmosphere. And Noun 60, that's the velocity at entry interface. Entry interface happens at 400,000 feet of altitude. So that's 36134. And then the entry angle is 6.49. And that's the same value that the burn or the maneuver planner also gave me. The EMS is giving me a range of 126.7.8. This is also part of the autopilot, as it will fly me through the atmosphere. But because I don't have that one yet, it will not try to give a perfect range to reach that exact splashdown point automatically. You will need to try that to do that yourself. And then the velocity at 0.5 G, 3, 6, 2, 1, 5. Then the time of 0.5 G, and that's quite fast after entry interface, since we will be traveling at very high velocities. So for Earth orbit, this will be much longer. 0, 4, 0, 7. The next one this is for how much time from entry interface until 0.5 G, about half a minute. This one we will skip. This is for the skip out trajectories and stuff like that. And I will also skip these data points here. And then the lift vector is set to -1. And that's kind of the most important things. The other thing is that the CSM set time is set to 1:42. I'll just type it somewhere for 2:52:0. So this time here is quite important to know about, because this is kind of your reference time as you go towards entry interface. So what I'm going to do now is to quickly set the event timer, and I'm just going to first stop it, reset it, and then set it to 59. So what I want is to start the clock about 1 hour before the SM separation time, so 1425207. So that's 1415207. So I'll just time skip a little bit ahead. There we go. And then I'll start the event timer. Then I'll verify that this goes down. There we go. It doesn't need to be exact. Okay. So the lift vector, it wants me to start with the heads down, that's -1, which means that the lift vector will be pointing up. So once I start to hit the atmosphere, it will kind of bring the spacecraft upwards. Typically you would want to kind of dive into the atmosphere and roll and get out. So, but I'm flying manually here, so I just want to take it a little bit easy. So then I'm going to hit Roger and keep this entry pad here as I perform this procedure. So then I can just hit X, and just to show you, you can always bring up the entry pad that you previously filled out this way, and you can clear this if you want to refill this, of course. So I'm going to need this one pretty soon. But one of the things that I want to do now is to just verify that my IMUs is set to inertial. You can do this in orbit rate, then you can skip this step. But what you want the IMUs to be during entry is to kind of act like an aeroplane, so up and down, and all the maneuvering is a little bit more familiar to an airplane instead of spacecraft. So we'll align the IMUs with the local vertical at 0.5 G detection, or the entry interface basically. So I'm going to use P52 option 2, and this one will want me to provide them with time. So this is what time my IMU should be aligned with, and that's the RIT. So we're 25 plus 143 plus 4 plus 7.00. There we go. And that's it. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to just quickly align this one with a kind of simple procedure way. And then I'm going to close this one for a little bit and open the checklists. So as mentioned, I've been creating making some changes to the Earth entry and the lunar entry checklists, as well as making all of them runnable. And since we're on our way from the moon, we are performing a lunar entry. And the procedures are quite similar, but not 100%. So what I'm going to do now is to just follow this one here. So it mentions that the CMSM separation is used as timing guideline, and it should request the entry pad, and then you have the setting an event timer, and then we have a deorbit or lunar return vehicle preparation. And for the rest of this checklist, I will mostly use the run feature to quickly just perform some of them. I won't go through all of this in detail, since the Academy will cover kind of some of the major things, and then of course the other Academy lessons, for example ECS and stuff like that. So first of all, I'm going to toggle my seats, and then I'll just quickly start to run through this checklist. And I'll do this very quickly. Checking both pyros, looking good. One thing that I want to go through in detail is the EMS entry check. So first of all, make sure that this is off and the EMS is in standby, and then I'll set this to EMS1. So left clicking will bring this around in the correct direction, so always use the left mouse button on this one to always know what direction it should be going. And then we'll need to wait 5 seconds, and I'm using the event timer here to do that. Then I'll set this to normal, and then I'll wait 10 seconds. And after 10 seconds, we should see that all of the lights are off, and the rate indicator is 000, and that's something they are. So I'll just accept those. Step 2, wait 10 seconds, and after about 10 seconds, the 0.5 G light is on. There we go. 3. Let's wait 10 seconds in EMS test 3. The 0.5 G light should be on, and then the lower RSI light should be on. And then I'll set this one to 58. And then I'll go to 4, and this one mentions that 0.5 should be on, GB trace should stay within the pattern, which seems like it's doing, and the range indicator counts down to about 0. And don't worry if you get a little bit different values than 0 here, it can be slightly off. The last step is to set the EMS to test 5, and that's also for 10 seconds. And this is basically where you should always start the EMS. If you don't want to perform all of these steps, always make sure that you set it to test 5 and perform that test. This is required for the EMS to function properly. Right, so we've been doing this for 10 seconds. The 0.5 G light is on, RSC upper light is on, and range indicator has 0 out to 0, and the scribe should now be all the way back on its correct location at 0.28. Yeah, okay. The next thing that we want to do is to align the pattern here to 37, and that's where kind of the pattern starts. So that's 37 feet per second, and we will fine-tune this a little bit with our actual entry velocity, but this is where it starts. And all of these instructions can also be seen here. So the entry instructions is to be on standby, test mode 5, set scroll to 37, and then go through the range and set everything up correctly. So range set. Then we'll set this back to standby, and now we're basically here. Then I'll quickly go through these ones. Another new thing is the systems test. Not all of them are functional yet, but that's something I'm working on. But what we want to do is to check the temperatures of our command module jets and turn on the heaters if required. So let's check the first one. That's on 5C. And you can see that they are all 0, which means that all my jets are too cold. And on the blog post on Steam for the 0.92 update, I've also included a table that shows you kind of what the values are. But we will need to turn on the heaters. So let's close the command module heaters, get the logic on, and then down here set the CMRCS heaters to on. And they should be on for about 20 minutes. And I'll quickly use timescale for the first part here. Now you can see that it's slowly starting to get some heat. So the next steps are at T-minus 40. I am going to just timescale a little bit further until the heaters are all okay. There we go. Heaters off. And now we are going to pressurize the command module RCS. I've been doing quite a lot of updates on the command module jets as well as the heater and the pressurization of it. So previously these haven't really worked properly. So you can see that if I set to CM1 and 2, all of these would always be completely wrong. So what I'm going to do now is to pressurize the command module RCS. You can see that the helium pressure has reduced a little bit as the pressure goes into the system, and that we have pressure in it. That's these values are on CM1 and CM2. And to be able to pressurize the CMRCS using this switch, the pyros will need to be armed. Now we can perform a very quick test of our jets. I can also look from the outside here. And they seem to be working, and I'll bring it back to the service module. Now at 31 minutes, so we'll time skip until 30. Then we will do something like this, and then we have SM separation. And I'll quickly use the burn planner to get an update on the time. That's 42:21. I could also, of course, just open my pad and subtract. So what we are going to do now is to timescale a little bit further. we're about to separate from the service module, so we'll need to reconfigure the ECS so that we no longer require the fuel cells to be on. Done. Then we'll time escape to about 8 minutes. Then I'll make sure that this one gets filled up. And also check the surge tank. Then set this to on. Then set the SM supply to off. We are now 100% relying on the command module and not the service module. We can power down a couple of things. And then we should be ready to separate. And of course there's a separation attitude, so I'll just quickly yaw out a little bit here for now. For Earth entry, the separation happens inside of program 61, while here we do it before. And there we go. Okay, the next thing we want to do is to get into our entry attitude, and as you can remember from our pad, that was 151. I also have the corners, so I'll just move this one so I can bring it with me a little bit. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is to run program 61. That's the entry. And this one I've populated automatically to save you some time, and it tells me to the impact location and the heads up or heads down selection, and I'm going to start with -1 heads down. The next one is Gmax. This is part of the save state for now, but this is of course higher than 3.5. And then we have the predicted velocity at EI, and then the entry angle of about 6.5. And 63 tells me the RT goal, and I will need to change this one to the values from my pad. That's 1267.8. And 36215 is correct. And yeah, and the time from EI. So next we will set the article on the EMS. That's this value here, 1267. Point 8. Then we will need to set our initial velocity, and that's let's see, that's our entry velocity at 36, around here. And then this one is in standby, and then we'll set it to entry mode, and the EMS is now ready and configured for entry. All we need to do is to set this to normal, and it will start to move the pattern. Okay, hit Pro, and P61 should be calling P62, and P62 is running. The checklist 41 is that the SM should be separated. If this would be an earth entry, then you should have done it in this step now. But for now, we are just going to hit Pro, since we've already done it. Once again, you will see our predicted splash time point, and then heads up or heads down. Another new feature is if I go into Earth orbit view, you will see where it will try to splash us down, and that's on the coast towards Australia. But it will be a little bit before that. I'm going to then hit Pro. 62 then checks my trim attitude and figures out that I'm quite okay, and automatically moves to program 63. If it's not, you will need to maneuver so you can get into the correct attitude. And I'm going to monitor this here. Then I'm going to use time scale until R1 starts to increase, and R1 is my predicted, or my actual drag in G, so that's my G forces. And then you can see that my velocity is increasing. So I know that my entry velocity is about 36,200, so I'll just time scale until I'm getting somewhere close to that. 32,600, I mean. Okay, and we are waiting for 36,134. And I'll leave it at that for now. And if I now take a look at my mission time, it's 1:43:03:49. And if I look at my pad here, we will soon be hitting the atmosphere. So once we are getting into the correct velocity here, I will set this one to normal. The RSI, once I hit the normal, will be following the GDC. I can see that it's 0.405, and there we go. Okay, now you'll see that the G-forces here will start to build up, and that's the velocity down here. The G-force is down here, and it's starting to build up slightly. And I'm diving down into the atmosphere. And then I will use roll to control my lift vector. So right now my lift vector is up. And I can use this one to dive and control my G-forces. But I would like to keep it up for now. It's very easy to get an overload in G-forces. So now I'm going to skip, start to climb out a little bit. Right now I'm just basically controlling my vertical speed and my G-forces. And my first milestone is to get through. Right now I will need to make sure that I don't skip out of the atmosphere. So then I will be pointing my lift vector down back into the atmosphere. That's down. And yeah, so I'm just using this one here. You can see that my velocity is now captured into a circular orbit. That's 25,500 feet per second-ish. And that means that if I now skip out of orbit, I will no longer be in a catastrophic skip out orbit where I don't have enough oxygen or battery life in the command module to get back to Earth and perform the last bit of the entry. But I'm now in safe velocities, and I'm pointing my lift vector down to make sure that once I hit the air and more denser part again, I will dive down into the atmosphere. And the longer you skip out, the longer your range will be. So this is kind of how you can control your range. And this is this part, I don't have so much energy left to bring the capsule back up on a different trajectory and reduce G-load. So it's important to kind of make sure that you don't overload or dive too steep in, because you don't have enough energy to make it less steep, basically. So for example, now I will need to let's hope that I don't get a game over now. Another feature that I've been doing is to add a game over screen, and I can actually explode if my G load is too high. Right now we're on quite close to almost 8 Gs. reduce that load a little bit. I also need to make sure that I pay attention to my altimeter. Yeah, this one should be on. Oops. I have an override anyway, so. And then the landing. Right, drones are out. And it's normal that this goes a little bit out of the scroll. Yeah, and the rest you have seen many times before. If not, you can run through the academy. The descent does take a little bit of time, so there's one little thing that I still want to show you, and that's I can of course take a look at my chutes. I'll just deploy this now for fun. There we have them. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, there's one more thing that I would like to show you, and that's on mission control. So for the Moker, I've been adding a couple of new features as well. So I'm going to connect to a game. And just walk out. So there's Fido. So we are currently in Earth orbit of about 113.678 nautical miles and a PE of 106.224 nautical miles. So one more thing that I've been working on, and I will still be working on quite a lot going ahead. In this update, I will only have the basics. But if I now hit M, you can now see that I've added pads into the mission pad for mission controllers as well. And these ones can be used mostly as you plan stuff. So this works the same way as it does in-game. And you can draw in it if you want and start to enter the data that you want. And you will need a way to fill this data out. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that already. And that's mainly by using the maneuver planner on the RTCC. It will give you a lot of the data that you can use to fill out this form. But of course, there's a couple of features missing, and that's something that I wish to add going forward. So what I intend to do is to allow mission controllers to fill out pads locally, gather all the data. A couple of persons, couple of mission controllers can work in a team to get all the data they need for a pad. And then once they're ready with the pad and they have all the data that they want, and if they don't need any data, you can basically just, write NA on those things, or just stroke them out like this if it's not needed for a pad, because that data won't be needed to be communicated in detail then up to the astronaut. So once the pad is ready, give it to Capcom, and Capcom can then basically relay this information up to the astronaut and the crew in the capsule. And you can hit save, and this file will be saved. You can share it with anyone on Discord and so on. And I'm also working on different ways to share this directly inside of the room as well. But for now, you can use voice communication or the screenshot to give it to the Capcom person, and then the person can relay it up. But in order to find this data, I've been starting to create a tool for Fido, Retro, and so on. And this is just the bare bones. But the intention of this tool is to give you a toolbar here, which allows you to add maneuvering points, test different velocities to prepare burns, and then use the RTCC to see if that burn can be uplinked to the command module and so on. The other thing is to figure out different trajectories. Fido will need to be on top of the trajectory. So this will mainly be a tool for Fido, and you can switch between the moon and the Earth. The UI of this will change into more of a tool that you can work in to edit orbits, add velocities, and so on. But also test out retrograde burns to get the crew home in cases of an abort. And that's kind of Retro's job, to figure out how we get the crew home at any time in the mission. So Retro is always on in a mission. At any time in the mission, before TLI, during coasting, at lunar orbit, the Retro is responsible for getting the crew home. So this is mainly to be able to design orbits and calculate burns and get the crew where they want. So I don't know exactly how this tool will look like, but at least you will now be able to visually see where the spacecraft is. And another thing that I will be adding here right now, let's see if I can, maybe I didn't apply it on this build, but that's something I will do, is to show you the spacecraft in a 3D model, which basically shows you what attitude and direction this spacecraft is looking. So you can kind of see the spacecraft in orbit here in kind of a miniature format. And then secondly, I'm going to render the IMU platform as a plane, as well as the GDC platform, so you can basically see all of those. And you can also see that I've rendered all of the stars around here, and I will render the direction of the telescopes on board of the CSM, so you can kind of figure out what stars the CSM is currently looking towards, or if you want the CSM to align with a couple of stars for the pad, then you can figure that out using these vectors. So that's all kind of things that I've planned for. As you can always see kind of the visually the IMU, the GDC, the directions to stars, and so on. So basically like a navigation tool in addition to only planning burns. So yeah, that's it for this video today. I hope you will enjoy some of these new features that I've added to Reentry. I would like to end this by giving a big shout out to all the test pilots who have been spending very long days and nights on testing these bits. And now I look forward to giving it out to you guys so you guys can start helping me test this, because remember, we're still in early access. So I look forward to getting feedback on these features and also feedback if it works or not. And as always, if it doesn't work, if there's something, broken, you can always roll back to the previous version on Steam, and well, I'll fix the issues. So yeah, thanks for watching, and enjoy 0.92.